Before leaving the country, the president signs a law liberalizing the lease of private lands by foreign investors, extending the maximum lease period to 99 years. Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. The Senate Blue Ribbon Committee continues its motu proprio inquiry on anomalous flood control projects. You're looking at live pictures from the Senate. The Senate has subpoenaed 5 other contractors and 3 DPWH executives to attend today's hearing, including Curly Vizcaya and former Bulacan 1st District Assistant Engineer Bryce Hernandez. You can catch the streaming of that hearing on our Facebook page. Meanwhile, Senator Panfilo Lacson identified a certain undersecretary as a senior public works official who reached out to Senator Tito Soto's office after the elections to make budget insertions for 2026. President Bongbong Marcos expressed dismay over the hardships faced by Filipinos as he vowed to pursue a thorough investigation into alleged anomalies in infrastructure projects. In the latest episode of his podcast, the president warned there will be no sacred cows in the investigation, saying even friends and allies will not be spared. Still, he assured the public that government efforts continue to ease hardships and tackle these challenges.
I'm not disheartened, I'm not disappointed. I get very, very angry. How can you do this to people that have worked every day of their lives? Walang ginawa ito kundi magtrabaho. Nagsakripisyo ng mahirap for very little. Just to be able to send money home, just to be able to feed their family, send their children to school. That's all they want in life. Kukunin nyo pa sa kanila yon para bumili ng Rolls Royce. Nobody is more important than Filipinos. Nobody, not one person is more important. Not me, not anybody is more important.
A joint statement signed by civil society groups, politicians, and other officials calls for systemic reforms amid corruption issues surrounding flood control projects. The statement, spearheaded by the People's Budget Coalition, laments how the scandal kills Filipinos during the climate crisis and how corrupt officials flaunt their lavish lifestyles. The government should establish a system of transparency and accountability to ensure that the controversy won't happen again. Among the concrete reforms proposed include prohibiting budget insertions, releasing the list of all flood works, and sparing no one in the probe set to be conducted by the Independent Commission. The statement is signed by 121 organizations and 180 individuals, including CBCP President Pablo Virgilio Cardinal David, Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong, and former DPWH Secretary Rogelio Singson. On Saturday, Cardinal David issued a pastoral letter on behalf of the CBCP titled Beyond Survival, Rising Above the Floods of Corruption, calling on the faithful to, quote, make corruption shameful again. David said stolen funds should be returned to the nation's coffers, as many would remain poor without these resources. The Caloocan bishop urged the youth to use the digital platform to expose injustice, share facts, and demand reforms. The Shareholders Association of the Philippines, or SharePhil, is part of the 30-member coalition pushing for an independent investigation into the anomalous DPWH flood control projects. SharePhil focuses on investor education, shareholder advocacy, and promotes good corporate governance in the Philippines. With us now for more is SharePhil Chairperson Maria Aurora Boots Giutina Garcia. Good to see you, Boots. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cathy.
So what motivated SharePhil to join this advocacy?
Well, firstly, it aligns with our own values, okay? SharePhil stands for fairness, faith. The acronym is faith, fairness, independence, accountability, transparency, and honor. That said, I think there's no reason why we should not support such an initiative among CSOs and various business organizations. Secondly, I think it's also important to note that what is happening today has an impact on capital markets, which is our advocacy, the development and the growth of our capital market. As it is, we're already struggling to have a more significant capital market as in comparison with the other Asian countries. And yet, this situation or this what is happening today is actually going to have an impact, firstly, on the growth and development of the capital market. Secondly, on investor confidence, as it will create an environment of a high risk market which will not attract foreign investors. And thirdly, it also could result in downgrades in our risk ratings, which could impact on our ability to borrow at efficient costs.
Right.
So
And the costs are
important.
just so
Yes.
enormous as you rightly point out. But I'm curious to know as to what kinds of conversations you're having now with clients, given the backdrop in which they're doing business now in the Philippines, as you advise them on mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, corporate restructuring.
Of course, there's a concern about, well, among others, importantly, I think, is having a level playing field is a concern and has been a concern. How will I be able to grow my business if I do not have the same opportunity as another who seem to have the favored or to have better connections with businesses that or agencies that they'll have to deal with is a concern. I guess there's also a question of stability. What's going to happen next? After all of these investigations, what's next? To our mind, importantly, I think we need to continue after the communicated or outrage from public and from the other institutions concerned. More importantly, is for us to support and advocate for long-lasting and sustainable reforms in many aspects of doing business with government.
So there's also already been a challenge doing business here, and then put this on top of that. As part of the 30-member coalition, what are the next steps then in ensuring that the proposed independent commission has the authority and the resources that it needs to effectively investigate the corruption allegations?
I think all of the civil society organizations that have signed, and even others who continue to state their opposition or their concern about the situation, should be ready to provide their resources, their expertise and competence, and share their talent to this investigation, whether in providing information, providing expert competencies, and again, as I said, ensuring that the results of the investigation will actually result in, or rather will create reforms, which is much needed.
Well, given your extensive experience in corporate governance and shareholder advocacy, what do you think the best practices are from the private sector that can be applied to strengthening the oversight in public projects like flood control?
Well, to begin with, we would like to also promote, even among our members and listed companies, an ethical business culture. I think that's important to consider from a corporate governance point of view. Secondly, in line with our advocacy on investor education, we would like to encourage, or we would encourage our investing public to be choosy and choose the companies that are actually practicing good corporate governance. It's a process of, not only the listed companies or those going public to be themselves practicing governance. The public who is investing must as well take note of that and call their attention and only choose companies to invest in line with corporate governance practices.
So that's ethical business and doing what's right. It sounds like we're needing more than just structural reforms, or maybe even policy changes. What do you think they are that you believe are necessary to prevent corruption and mismanagement moving forward?
I think we need to review the procurement process. I've had my own experience in government. I've served government also for a bit of time. Importantly, I think a lot of the loopholes or the weaknesses arise in the procurement process from the time the terms of references are designed up to the point of awarding, and even importantly, through the monitoring process, ensuring that the projects that have been awarded are actually exist, especially if they're infrastructure projects. They're physically there. So there are a lot of weaknesses which can be addressed and gaps which need to be strengthened. I think the policies are there. The challenge has always been implementation.
What about when it comes to AMLA then? How does this coalition's push for accountability intersect with the broader issues around anti-money laundering, given the involvement of the Anti-Money Laundering Council in related investigations?
Well, I think among the members of the business community are the banking sector, financial institutions. So to the extent that they should cooperate in the investigations that there are going to or are happening are going to happen, I think that's an important consideration if the investigations are to succeed, because we are aware of how money laundering has been used to actually, launder, as they may say, the funds that have been diverted.
Okay, there's a lot more to do, but a lot more to uncover as we watch the Senate hearings. Thank you so much, Boots, for your insights. Boots Garcia of ShareFill. The Trade Department has named key officials to lead two of its agencies. Secretary Cristina Roque appointed Doris Gacho as acting executive director of the Construction Industry Authority of the Philippines, or SIAP, and Engineer Sergi Retome as acting executive director of the Philippine Contractors Accreditation Board, or PCAP. Roque says the designations ensure continuity as part of the ongoing revamp. An oversight and fact-finding team has also been to address the licensing issues and strengthen transparency and accountability. Business tycoon Manuel V. Pangilinan is joining San Miguel Group's Ramon Ang in his quest to help solve Metro Manila's flooding woes. Pangilinan said after a social lunch with Ang, he agreed to back SMC's flood control initiatives and coordinate with Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon, calling it a quasi-public-private partnership. Ang earlier launched the Better Rivers PH program, which has cleared over 8.5 million metric tons of silt and waste from 163 kilometers of waterways, all at no cost to government. The two tycoons, who already partner in energy and tollway ventures, are now joining forces on flood solutions. President Bongbong Marcos has signed a new law extending long-term land leases for foreign investors to boost stability and attract more capital. Republic Act 12252, or the law liberalizing the lease of private lands, raises the maximum lease period from 50 to 99 years. The measure amends the Investors' Lease Act to guarantee reliable contracts, require registration with the Registry of Deeds, and limit leases to approved purposes. It also imposes stricter penalties for violations and mandates foreign lessees to show economic and social benefits before renewal. You're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, President Marcos undertakes a 3-day state visit to Cambodia. And Endro Mendoza, Rap for Financials, joins us for a conversation on market sentiment. Keep it here on One News.
Sa mga department secretaries ay si Congressman J.J. Suarez. So ang ginawa ko po, Your Honor, tinawagan ko siya, hiningi ko po yung
Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. U.S. markets slid modestly on the back of a weak labor market after the latest hiring report showed only 22,000 jobs were added in August. The Dow slid last Friday by 0.4%. S&P 500 tumbled by 0.33%, and the Nasdaq fell by less than 0.1%. Benchmark 10-year Treasury yields ticked down to 4.085%. Gold prices reached another high, settling at $3,613 per troy ounce. U.S. futures point to slight gains when the markets open later tonight Manila time. The Nasdaq is up by 0.33%. Both the S&P and the Dow rise by 0.1% each. Asian markets are a mixed bag this Monday following the resignation of the Japanese Prime Minister. Japan's Nikkei 225 jumps by over 1.7%. South Korea's Kospi rises by 0.2%, and Australia's ASX 200 is down by 1/3%. And a quick check on the Philippine markets, which have just started trading. PSCI opens this Monday higher by 0.2% at 6,162. The local bourse ended the week on the green, climbing by nearly 0.7%. Investors found August's 1.5% inflation print manageable as it falls within the Bangko Central's target range, according to Regina Capital. The broader All Shares Index picked up by 0.4%, with the sectoral gauges all in the green except for financials. As for the Philippine peso, it opens today stronger, 56.77 to the dollar. Peso closed last Friday a tad stronger, 56.915 against the greenback. And the 10-year government bond yield slightly ticked down to 6.001%. Joining us today is Enro Mendoza, VP of Strategy and Business Transformation of Ramper Financials, a financial advisor and investment firm in the Philippines, one of the largest non-bank mutual fund distributors in the country, managing assets worth over 18 billion pesos. Good to see you, Enro. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Cathy.
All right, so what do you make of market sentiment there with the hearings going on and the anomalous flood control projects and a budget that I would say is now held hostage for 2026 because of what's going on?
Yeah, a lot of big news, especially in the Philippines. And as we all know, the Philippine market is highly sentiment driven. So especially with all of these government news, all of these clamor for governance, good governance, budgets, it's very important that it reflects to the capital markets as well. And since it's sentiment driven, we get a mixed bag. Sometimes companies share high earnings, good dividend rates. However, it doesn't really reflect in the share prices. So here in the Philippines, we're also a market that needs more investors. We need more volume in our markets.
Right. When I look at the markets, it's been a 4-week losing streak. We've gone that long. The market sentiment's just weak. A lot of confidence is lost. What is the market looking for? What sort of a catalyst is it wanting to have?
Yeah, so for our clients, these are questions and these are things that they always bring up, like, what do I need to look out for? Are there other options for me? And luckily, our local players have opened options for Philippine investors. With your Philippine peso, they can now invest globally as well. So as much as us financial players, we want to infuse more capital in our Philippine markets, we're now also starting to advise our clients to diversify globally.
When you're saying clients, that's presumably the Gen Zs and the millennials of the 60,000 in your clientele list?
Yeah, a lot of them are, especially during the pandemic when Ramper Financials really wanted to reach out to new markets. We became active on social media, on YouTube, really trying to educate the next generation of investors. We got a lot of interest and opening of accounts for our online platform.
So this is the first time they're actually feeling the pinch. I mean, it's not easy going. I mean, the stock market they did invest in, but this probably is the biggest challenge. Given that, when you look at the fundamentals, and I wanted to pull this up, the fundamentals are looking pretty good at 10.6x. When you compare that with a 5-year historical average of 17.3x and the regional average of 17.6x. So it's a matter of really convincing them that the fundamentals are intact.
Yes.
But how do you do that, given that they don't really have the experience of being hurt, if you will?
Yeah, I think to put it in another angle, this is putting them at an advantage. That if they start investing now, if they're in it for the long term, they're trying to address and achieve their long-term goals, like possibly buying their first home, having a good retirement, now is actually a good time to invest because they weren't burned from those dips in the market. I mean, we saw most recently from the pandemic crash, losing 30%, 40%. We're now climbing back from that, and when we look at the market's all-time high back in around 2017, 2018, that's the potential of the Philippine market. So we just need to be patient, trust the process, and make sure that we're investing in good companies. A while ago, I heard from our guest, also investing in companies with good governance, people in the management helm, making sure that the companies stay relevant for years and decades to come.
Well, picking up on what you said earlier, that it's really the overseas markets that appear to be more attractive for now. Just connecting the dots between 2017 and now, it seems that the pathway is globally, invest globally. Is that correct? And if so, how do you actually diversify? What are you teaching your clients?
Yeah, that's a good point. Now that there are options locally, investing globally is really a good option for our clients because, yes, the Philippine market, there's a lot of potential in it. Right now, we're still waiting for markets to grow and reach that all-time high, but diversifying globally is now an option. We look at markets that have high potential for new technologies like AI, global tech, possibly even consumer, spending abroad is really high right now. So in terms of investing globally, we have our partners like ATR Asset Management, Sun Life Asset Management, and through our online platform, Rampver Online, which you can visit at rampver.com/enro, we have high potential growth in those markets. So just to mention some of the funds that are doing well.
Well, let's take a look at that chart because it's interesting when you consider that the markets have been down. PSEI has been down about 5%. You're looking at returns here north of 9%, even double digit.
Yeah.
I'm looking at. How are they invested then? How are they making money in this kind of an environment? Considering that if you go globally, you're going to be more exposed to the tariff uncertainties of Trump.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the balancing act is really the efficient markets that they have globally. Because in the Philippine market, we lack the volume, we lack the liquidity, and it's not an efficient market. So in a way, fund managers would have not necessarily an easy time, but an easier time than in the global markets to outpace the rate of the PSEI. However, in the global markets, it's a highly efficient market. Yes, they are affected, but it would be harder for a fund manager to outpace the rate of their indexes, like the S&P 500. So
what sort of time frame are you looking at for them to come back to the Philippine markets? Do you see that in the medium or maybe short term?
Yeah, right now we're still highly optimistic that the recovery year, the recovery phase of the Philippine market will come. But as I always tell my clients, we can't really promise when that is. But the signs are there, the companies, the earnings are there. We need to stay patient. But in the meantime, we can diversify for the medium-term and long-term goals that they have.
Right, that's sound advice. Stay patient and diversify. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cathy.
Mendoza of Rampver Financials. Well, Taguig Court has ordered the Bureau of Immigration to release Global Ferronickel chairman Joseph C. after granting his petition for habeas corpus. C was detained at NAIA on August 21st after the immigration alleged he misrepresented his citizenship, claiming his fingerprints matched those of a Chinese national. The presiding judge, Paz Esperanza Cortez of Taguig RTC Branch 271, gave, quote, superior weight to C's birth certificates and passports affirming his Filipino citizenship. It also ruled the BI cannot pursue deportation without biometric proof. The FNI chief's lawyers called the decision a vindication, saying citizenship cannot be stripped by speculation. The immigration, however, insists it has strong evidence backed by biometric records. While it respects the court's order, it has filed an appeal before the Court of Appeals. The embattled tycoon remains on leave from FNI, with company president Dante Bravo serving as acting chairman. Meralco is seeking approval from the Energy Regulatory Commission for a 20-year supply deal with First Quezon Biogas Corporation. The agreement will source 1.25 megawatts from FQBC's Candelaria plant, which converts farm waste into clean energy. Meralco says the rate of 6 pesos and 50 centavos per kilowatt hour is lower than market prices and could save consumers 15.2 million pesos. Signed in July, the deal supports renewable energy targets and is part of Meralco's long-term supply plans through 2046. Meralco and Signal, the owner of this channel, are both part of the MVP Group. For more stories, visit Philippine Star and Business World's websites. President Bongbong Marcos arrived in Cambodia Sunday, September 7 for his 3-day state visit. Marcos met with the Filipino community in Phnom Penh, where he ordered Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Kapdak to establish a migrant workers office in Cambodia. This aims to strengthen protection for OFWs, praising Filipinos abroad for uplifting the image of the Philippines. Around 7,500 Filipinos are based in Cambodia. The chief executive is also expected to hold talks with Cambodian leaders and witness the signing of various agreements. Here are the headlines from around the globe. In Japan, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has resigned, taking the blame for his party's recent election losses and throwing Tokyo into a period of political uncertainty. Ishiba was only elected to lead last year. He failed to garner popularity as voters remain angry over rising living costs. Under his watch, the Liberal Democratic Party has lost its majorities in both chambers of the Diet, the country's parliament. Before stepping down, Ishiba had focused on ironing out details of a trade deal with the U.S. He was able to bring down auto tariffs from 27.5% to 15%. And in the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV has canonized the Catholic Church's first millennial saint, Carlo Acutis. Born in 1991, the Italian teenager was a computer programmer who used technology to document miracles around the world and spread the faith. He died of leukemia in 2006 at the age of 15. Leo also canonized Pier Giorgio Frassati, who in his time was a political and social activist in Italy. Frassati joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society and dedicated his life for the poor and the sick. He died of polio in 1925 at the age of 24. In his homily, Leo said both men are a reminder for young people, quote, not to squander our lives, but to direct them upward and make them masterpieces. And Filipino tennis star Alex Ayala has made history, winning her first Women's Tennis Association singles title at the Guadalajara Open in Mexico. Ayala rallied past Hungary's representative in 3 sets to clinch the championship. With the victory, Ayala climbed to world number 61 in the Women's Tennis Association rankings. She now heads to Brazil for the Sao Paulo Open. And before we go, let's take a look at that blood moon that lit up the skies Sunday night during the total lunar eclipse. If you were still awake at 2 a.m. Manila time, it lasted over an hour and was most visible across Asia, parts of Europe, Africa, and Western Australia. The phenomenon occurs when the Earth and Moon and Sun align, casting the planet's shadow on the Moon and turning it into copper red. That's the color of the day, isn't it? Copper red. That is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. And catch the live stream of the Senate hearing into the flood control projects on our Facebook page. Have a great day ahead.
Notan niyo po, yan, magbabalanse po yan. 13,803,693 with Congressman Saldico as proponent. And pag tinotal mo yung district, yung subtotal, 13,803,693,000, Your Honor.